Starting today's newscast with the Octa research group, saying that the country could hit 9,000 cases this week before ECQ.
Based on projections have a range of error, and so we cannot say that this is exactly what would happen. When we see this doubling rate, doubling every 2 weeks, this is usually indicative of the rate of spread of the Delta variant.
Meanwhile, Health Secretary Francisco Duque confirms that the country is now feeling the effects of the spread of the Delta variant.
Malinaw po na halos lahat po ay nagtataasan na ang bilang ng mga kaso. Mabilis po na kumalat ito, lalo na kung wala pong sapat na mga proteksyon na ang ating po mga kababayan.
Let me just assure everybody, anywhere in the Philippines, that the vaccines that we are giving is for all Filipinos.
The Delta variant is now being felt across the country as the Health Department has reclassified Metro Manila and 5 other regions as high-risk COVID-19 areas. But with the scheduled lockdown, is the country going back to square one? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to this special edition of The Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama po natin online Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5, and Ed Lingao of One News. Chiefs, happy Tuesday.
Hello, good evening.
Diretso na natin sa guest natin. I understand we have a number of guests lined up for tonight. Let's start with Philippine General Hospital spokesperson Dr. Jonas Del Rosario. Dr. Del Rosario, welcome once again to The Chiefs.
Magandang gabi sa inyo.
Good evening,
Magandang gabi,
Dr.
Doc.
Jonas.
Sir, umpisa tayo sa kumustahan, but I also want to frame it this way. What is the mood and the atmosphere sa Frontlines ngayon compared to how it was when you asked for a timeout last year and when we had that surge in March and April?
I think we're a little bit more confident of the incoming or possible surge kasi for one thing, about 85% of our frontliners are fully vaccinated. And based on what we are seeing right now, although we have breakthrough infections, some of our healthcare workers are getting infected with presumably the Delta. Most of them have mild cases. So nobody so far suffered any severe or critical disease. So in that sense, in a way, we're much better than the first time we encountered this because everybody was worried about what's going to happen. So the vaccination helped. Secondly, of course, we have learned our lessons for the past 1.5 years. We have made adjustments. Been there, done that. So the drills are easier now. And so I think the people, our workforce are more prepared to handle this.
Bakit presumably Delta? I mean, we know that is it because that's best practice, as DOH says, we might as well presume na it's Delta, or is it something that you're seeing in the numbers and the symptoms?
Presumably Delta because we don't have the confirmation of the genome sequencing, you know. As you know, hindi naman araw-araw, once you have the RT-PCR, you cannot right away find out what is the type of variant that you have. But at least we have 21 out of the 72 samples initially that turned out to be Delta in the Philippines came from PGH. And our numbers are increasing. Our numbers are increasing steadily. So medyo tahimik na nun eh. So we basically have this attitude na assume this is a Delta variant until proven otherwise.
Yung okay, we've seen your numbers rise from 100 to 150 plus in just 2 weeks. It's a 50% increase. Eh.
Yes.
How are you coping with that? Do you have enough facilities? Although, bagay, yung occupancy ninyo eh, hindi pa naman tumatama sa critical.
Yeah, tama, no? About 2 weeks, a little bit over 2 weeks, our numbers were like 100, 105 lang, no? Tapos, biglang the last 10 days, very steady, paakyat na paakyat. And then today, we hit the highest so far for the last 2 months, 154. Our bed capacity is 225. So we're about close to 68% occupancy. our eyes, close to mga 70 na, no? Tapos yung ICUs namin ang medyo napupuno, no? Kasi, as you know, we are a referral center, so most of the time we get the sicker patients. So, severe and critical. So, mga almost close to 90% ang occupancy ng adult ICU for COVID. And then we also have a small pediatric ICU also for COVID. We're seeing some kids also getting sicker this time.
Doctor, can you compare the situation to the surge in March and April? Kasi tonight, sinabi ng Department of Health, ang Metro Manila daw and 5 regions are now classified as high risk for COVID. So, ano yung inaasahan kaya natin? Gaano kabilis you say it's looking like Delta? Nung March and April, ano yung occupancy nyo? Halimbawa, ano yung capacity, yung healthcare, yung personnel nyo capacity?
Well, comparing, we cannot actually expand further. We have allocated 225. Actually, we stretched it to 250 during the March-April surge, no? Because it was really necessarily kulang po talaga. So we really had to close our non-COVID wards. And so just using that model, we have that number also, no? We peg it at 225, easily expandable to another 25 to 30 beds depending on the need, no? The limitation that we will actually probably have a problem with is if there are really so many cases, it's going to be manpower, no? As always, no? Hindi naman dumami yung nurses namin, hindi naman dumami yung doctor. It's the same number. So what's going to happen is kung talagang abala tayo sa COVID, then we have no choice but to really streamline and ano ba tawag doon? I-contract yung non-COVID operations ng PJ so that we again get this pool of nurses back to their COVID assignments.
Doc, can you give us an idea of the profiles of your patients now, yung COVID patients? Like how many of them are fully vaccinated? How many are just vaccinated for one dose? How many of them are not vaccinated at all? Parang ganon.
Kanina, we had a meeting and I said, they might ask me of the profile, right? So we looked at the 150 admitted this morning, and 85% of them are unvaccinated.
Oh, wow.
11% are partially vaccinated, just got one dose, and then the rest are fully vaccinated. And then, so clearly, well, some people will say, talaga namang mas maraming unvaccinated pa din, right? So if you look at the ratio of vaccinated and unvaccinated, maybe what we're seeing is a representation also of pretty much the vaccination status of the community, right? So
Yes.
on the other hand, the thing that strikes us is all ICU patients, those who are critically ill, are all unvaccinated.
And what are the demographics? Are they, as usual in the A2, A3, priority list, yung mga seniors and persons with comorbids?
Marami. As usual, may comorbids, a few seniors. We are also seeing a little bit a trend of younger patients coming in, which is probably a reflection that they say this Delta gives you a higher viral load, and maybe kaya ganon, no? And I was told by...
Totoo pala yun. Kasi nababasa nga namin na parang there are more younger people, di ba? I mean, there are more of them, the younger people.
Correct. Now, the other segment na nakatakot, we're always concerned about the senior citizens, right? Kasi vulnerable, so we really have to protect them. But in the pediatric COVID ICU, we have about 6 patients who are COVID. These are kids who obviously are not vaccinated because they're not part of the priority, and we're not giving vaccines to kids. So we have some infants, a little bit younger group na wala pang bakuna, no? Which in a way tells us na, these kids probably got COVID from their adult household members. Hindi naman lumalabas yan, no? So, which brings home the point that I think we really have to vaccinate everyone. Or you get vaccinated not only to protect the elderly, but you also have to protect the young ones because they have no access, or right now they're not allowed to get the vaccines.
Doc, so at this rate, do you see us getting into the same situation as March and April, or worse, the India situation with the Delta. Knowing, how few of our countrymen are
I'm not.
vaccinated fully. Yeah.
I'm not sure about the India, no, but at least at the rate that is going now, parang at least we can probably have that same surge sa March na yon, yung talagang mabilis no. And I think that's the reason why it's very timely na to put a halt kung pwede nga ngayon na, but there are a lot of considerations, so be that as it may, at least we will have a 2-week lockdown. It might be difficult, but I think that's one way of slowing down the transmission and getting our bearings back and making sure. As you know, there are a lot of hospitals now which are almost full. I'm sure you have heard of stories in the Visayas and how they are coping, and there are a lot of stories na nasa labas na ng ospital. Wala pa naman po yung PGH na ganon, but we're really getting ready and bracing ourselves for that eventuality.
Doc, in terms of getting ready, I was going to ask nga, a lot of LGUs are trying to be prepared and preemptive for this. As you said, everybody's assuming that there is a surge coming. Kanina we were reporting Manila has started moving mild cases out of hospitals to their field hospitals. I guess one question is, are you confident that that can keep pace with the surge as we're seeing it? And I guess more generally, what else do LGUs need to prepare or to be mindful of as they prepare?
I think the first question, can we keep? I think the difference right now is just like what you said. Before yung March and April, there are not a lot of quarantine centers. I'm happy that Manila has that facility. It at least unloads the referral centers of the mild cases, or you really have to get these people, even if they are mildly symptomatic, out of their community, especially in their households wherein they cannot really effectively isolate themselves. No? And I also support this drive na really trying to get people out of their... May marami kasi dyan takot no? Marami actually. Our plea is, kung meron kang nararamdaman, meron kang sakit, nilalagnat ka, mukhang may trangkaso ka, and you cannot isolate yourself effectively, you have to tell your barangay, sa LGU, sa inyong mga barangay health emergency response team, na kailangan mong ihiwalay ang sarili mo. No? Otherwise, you're going to spread the disease. It's almost like chicken pox daw kasi one person can easily infect eight persons, and contact is not even 15 minutes, even less than that. So transmission is quite fast. So I think we really have to isolate, try to get them early, and do contact tracing effectively. In the meantime, also use this lockdown to vaccinate as many as we can.
Okay, Dr. Jonas Del Rosario, spokesperson for PGH. We know you're very busy, and we said we have to move on to other guests. Maraming salamat po for joining us.
Thank you, Doc Jonas.
Ingat, Doc.
Ingat.
And we'll go from Manila straight to Cebu. We're now joined on the line by Kaycent Magsumbol from the Freeman. Maayong gabi, Kaycent.
Yes, may gabi. Good evening po sa inyong lahat.
Maayong gabi.
Good evening.
So far, okay naman po yung situation ngayon. Hindi na katulad nung isang araw na nagkakalanggalain na yung mga patients sa hospitals. Inaayos na ng hospital kung paano nila. Nagpunuan kasi yung emergency room, kaya yung iba naghintay talaga sa labas. Kasi meron, yung ibang mga hospitals na pinuntahan nila, tinanggihan na rin sila. And,
Pero Kaycent, paano na-resolve ba? Paano na-resolve ba? Ang bilis naman na-resolve ba? Paano na-resolve ba? Anong nakita ng solusyon para dun sa linya sa labas ng hospital?
yung nag-augment yung DOH ng personnel kasi kulang din ng mga nurses. Talaga. In total, yung private hospitals here needs at least 150 to 200 nurses. And konti pa lang yung ng DOH nare-recruit.
May rush pa rin to buy oxygen tanks. Saka kumusta dun sa mga shopping centers? Meron bang nakikitang panic buying?
Yung bago mag-August 1. Pero pagkatapos naman nung nakita nila yung quarantine protocols naman, hindi naman ganun hindi na tuloy-tuloy yung panic buying. Pero yung sa mga oxygens po, ano talaga, yung personal na ano yun ng iba. Pero babala din ng DOH na dapat may medical personnel kasi flammable siya, mahirap na, tapos dadalhin sa mga bahay.
So
Okay,
wala
so-
na yung mga nasa sidewalk na nakahiga, wala na yung
po,
mga yun?
kanina, lang, may mga ilan-ilan lang na mga sasakyan naghihintay sa labas. Pero okay naman po.
Pero Kaysent, may storya ka ata kanina sa Freeman lumabas na yung nagkakaroon ng backlog doon sa cremation ng mga patay
Ay,
dahil sa
opo.
dami.
Oo.
Parang isang linggo raw yung backlog.
Yung parang next na available, yung sa pa lang yun yung sa isang araw. Mga August 9 pa. Kasi nasira din yung isang crematorium. Yung equipment nila. So, mas lalong nagkakaano. So, kino-coordinate na lang nila with Mandawi City kasi meron silang yung freezer.
Pero bakit ba? Tumaas yung,
morgue
tumaas yung
muna.
bilang, malaking pagtaas ng bilang ng mga namamatay? Ganun ba?
For July alone, for Cebu City alone, 78. It's not 69 pala. It's 78. Kasi yung may nadagdag pa nung kahapon, sa July pa yon na na deaths.
So anong paliwanag ng Cebu local government na kasi binalik pa kayo sa GCQ lang with heightened restrictions sa halip
Yung
na
Cebu province po.
mag-MECQ. Oo, paano yun? Bakit sa tingin mo ba tama ba yung move na yun? Anong dahilan nun? Anong basehan?
Nag-appeal yung Tri-Cities, Mandawi City, Lapu-Lapu, and Cebu City na i-lower down kasi hindi naman, if you're only looking at the critical care utilization rate, hindi lahat ng pasyente ng hospitals here are from their cities. Meron ding maraming patients that are from LGUs from the Cebu province. Yun yung inaano nila.
Yes. So pero ano talaga ang sitwasyon? Talaga bang ganun yun? I mean, karamihan ng mga pasyente ay hindi naman talaga taga Cebu City, hindi naman talaga taga Mandawi. May ganun bang profiling? Totoo naman yun.
Pero I don't have
Accurate.
I don't have the updated figure, pero the last na mas marami talaga ang taga Cebu province.
Okay.
Okay.
Ano
Pero
po,
Kaysent, these are just yung mga dumadagdag sa kaso sa mga ospital, or are there also issues at the border that the LGUs and the Tri-Cities will have to contend with sa borders?
Wala masyado sa borders, pero yung na mismo, yung iba ding mga yung neighboring provinces, sila na rin yung nagre-restrict.
Kumusta
So-
ang border control nyo saka yung quarantine protocols? Kasi nagkaroon ng misunderstanding yung Cebu City noon saka yung national government, di ba? Dun sa facility quarantine. Kumusta na yung pinatutupad dyan ngayon?
Yung sa naman dito po, nag-adjust na sila sa curfew hours 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. Pati liquor ban pinapatupad na rin po ulit.
Yung sa quarantine, yung protocol sa pagka-quarantine ng mga dumadating dyan.
Okay na po, yung sinusunod nila, yung sa IATF.
IATF na. So,
Opo.
testing.
So pareho na rin.
Opo.
Oo.
Wala nang exemption dito.
Facility, facility quarantine na.
Opo.
Okay.
Kumusta naman ang bakunahan dyan? I mean, tuloy-tuloy rin naman at marami na rin
Opo.
bang nagpapabakuna?
Ang
Tumataas na ba ang...
nangyari nga po nung kailan yun, nag-issue ng EO si Mayor Ahong Chan of Lapu-Lapu na no vaccine, no entry for commercial centers.
Right.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be on August 25 pa. So,
Right.
syempre, nagpapanik na yung mga tao. Pati hindi taga Lapu-Lapu City, nagtitake chance na magpapabakuna.
Okay. Kasi
Oo,
nakakatakot talaga yun eh.
Oo, syempre, pero ang dami nga nagrereklamo kasi pati yung mga hindi pa pwedeng bakunahan, paano na daw sila? So, pati kina-question na nila, tumaabot na ng DILG and all, kasi si DOH din dito, sabi, tanong nyo na sa DILG na daw yun na concern. So, pero ngayon naman, ni-revoke na niya yung EO na yun. So, hindi na matutuloy.
Okay. Kala ko kasi baka gayahin pa ng mga iba di ba?
Opo. Yun na nga. Kaya yung ibang LGUs dito, yung mga locals, nagpapabakuna na rin sila. In a way, nakakatulong din na biglang nagpapabakuna yung mga tao.
Well, Keisha, I think we're trying to get a good grasp or a better grasp kung gaano ka seryoso o critical yung sitwasyon diyan sa Cebu. Kasi parang mixed signals ba? Na hindi kami sigurado sa Manila kung kumusta kayo diyan. Kasi on one hand, parang di ba, nagkakaroon ng backlog sa cremation, tapos yung mga images dun sa mga hospital kahapon at ng isang araw, parang nakaalarma. Pero on the other hand naman, si Governor gusto niyang ibaba yung quarantine restrictions at least for the whole province. So, sa huli, kamusta ang Cebu province at ang Cebu City? Kayo ba'y critical? Kayo ba'y nangangarag? Kayo ba'y well and good na?
We're hoping na ma-solve yung talaga namin sa kakulangan ng nurses, especially now na may bagong update kami na 132 healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, medtechs, and a lot more ay na-infect na rin ng COVID-19 for the last 14 days. So,
Okay.
nakadagdag talaga ng problema.
Oo, dagdag talaga ng problema yan kasi may 200 na kayong shortage ng healthcare
Opo.
workers, di ba? So,
Tapos may pa na 132. Pero ang good thing lang is most of them are asymptomatic and mild lang yung
pero they
cases.
cannot work. I mean, at least for the next 2 weeks,
Oo nga
they cannot work. So,
Oo,
blanco
pati
yung
yung
kanilang
close
posisyon.
contact nila kailangan din i-isolate.
Pero sa ngayon, okay na sa inyo yung classification ninyo quarantine kasi yung iba parang tingin na kailangan medyo maghigpit pa ng konti.
Opo, pero yun na nga din ang problema like sa Cebu province, although kasi parang tuloy yung tourism activities, although may limit. Kaya nagkakagulo din dito pati yung feedbacks ng mga yung sa medical community na parang nadidismaya na rin sila na parang syempre pagod na rin and all, and then hindi rin wala talaga. Gusto din sana ng ng acting mayor ng Cebu City na unified yung rules, pero iba-iba din naman sila ngayon ng quarantine protocol, so yun.
Province-wide, iba-iba. Province-wide. So,
Iba yung sa Cebu province, iba yung sa Cebu City, Lapu-Lapu, at Mandaue.
So, pinag-uusapan ngayon na magkaroon ng uniform o...
Sana, yun ang ginusto nila, pero ngayon hindi na rin kasi yung Tri-City, sila lang yung MECQ, tapos yung GCQ.
So hindi rin pala kasi kanina binalita yan. For example, tourism activities like canyoneering, I saw that mga river canyoneering, papayagan there's a 30% limit. So supposedly this is to help shore up yung turismo na napakahalaga sa Cebu. But even there in Cebu, hati yung mga tao on whether or not that's a good idea?
Yes, especially yung mga naka-experience na ng matindi talaga na lockdowns and all.
Okay.
Kasi pati yung mga taga Cebu province nagpupunta din sa cities.
Oh, sige. Okay, Kaysent, maraming salamat. That's Kaysent Magsumbol from the Freeman in Cebu City. The Freeman is a partner of One News. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back. Welcome back, the Chiefs here on One News. I'm Robbie Alampay, still with Ed Lingao, Ami Pamintuan, and Lucy Cruz Valdez. And now joining us, Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship, Joey Concepcion. Mr. Concepcion, welcome once again to the Chiefs.
Magandang gabi po.
Good evening po, sir.
Hi Lucy, hi Ami, hi Ed, hi Robbie.
Magandang gabi po. Sir, your assessment, kamusta po ang private sector heading into ECQ?
Well, tomorrow we have our big town hall meeting on the NCR lockdown. Si Chairman Avalos and myself are hosting that together with the mayors of NCR and of course the IATF, si Capsec Nograles will be there, Vince of course, and Secretary Anyo. And we have presentations from DOH, no? Si Dr. Atela de Guzman, of course, Father Nick will be there, and John Wong. No? So 3 different models. And we have close to maybe over 1,000 companies that will be attending this. No? In a way, I did the most unpopular thing. I listened to Ranjit here. No? For his advice was, I think we have to lock down.
Siya pala ang salarin.
But, you know, in all honesty, I felt that, you know, considering their level of accuracy, and I saw the numbers, and I felt that locking down early, and I consulted a number of business people now in the private sector. Not all of them, of course, agreed, but I felt it was very important to try to preserve the 4th quarter, no? Because if we lock down on the 4th quarter, that will be more devastating because, as we know, Christmas season, consumer spending is at its high. Coupled with election spending, it will be much higher. So many of the entrepreneurs can really recover, no? Especially the micro, small, and medium enterprises who have been challenged through these whole months, especially in the 1st quarter, in the 2nd quarter of this year, where we had that very long lockdown. So makakabawi sila dito sa 4th quarter. And the vaccination efforts of the government is moving on. The private sector as well. AstraZeneca vaccines have arrived about 2 weeks ago. We have an arrival pretty soon by next week. Hopefully they give confirmation from Thailand. So we're ready. And the many people think that the lockdown is the solution to this pandemic. No? The lockdown just buys us time because it's a race towards the unvaccinated. The unvaccinated has the highest risk of infection, of death. They are the ones that are what worries us. So our vaccines have to get to them first before Delta gets to them. And that's our goal. And that's why we want to slow down the movement of Delta. And this is why there is this 2-week lockdown. And Octa suggested that. And if you look at it, what made IETF change their mind? Because they were at GCQ, they reinstated GCQ. But they kept it on, no? And moved to ECQ. And what is that? And tomorrow we will see the numbers presented by Dr. Atela de Guzman of DOH, which shows that the infection levels were really ramping up, will be projected to be ramped up. And it confirms with Octa's own findings. So if you look at both reports, no, it makes sense that we should lock down early. Habang August is a rainy month, it's normally the ghost month according to the Chinese, but not many people believe that. But it's just the weather. So I'd rather take it early while the levels of infection are still manageable. But when it blows up to what will be presented tomorrow, then you're looking at the 4th quarter that will be severely challenged, will break the backs of many of our MSMEs. They'll be moving to the year 2022 with less confidence, no? And that's what we don't want to do. And I think that's the whole objective, that this lockdown has been moved to ECQ. And tomorrow, hopefully we align with we will definitely align with Chairman Avalos. No? In fact, he was instrumental and pleaded for that the government considered a 2-week lockdown. This is the first time that we would push a lockdown. Normally we go against the lockdown, but
Yes.
this is different. This is Delta. No, this is not the old U1 virus or the Alpha. This is something more and highly infectious.
Dr. Concepcion, are there also measures being considered to ramp up testing and contact tracing? Because this is what some of the business groups are saying, that the
Yes.
be complemented by ramping up of capacities for testing in particular and for contact tracing.
I think you cannot avoid testing. You have to even test more to really create more visibility. Without testing, you don't have visibility. Once you have visibility, you identify those who have been infected, then you have to trace. No? Now, vaccination is now what I call the most important thing now that we have to do. We have to be faster than Delta running after the unvaccinated. So with the 4 million doses that will be given to NCR, and plus the current, we have 1.15 million that's being deployed right now with maybe close to 700 companies all over with shared vaccination facilities, care of SM, Robinson, Ayala. I mean, the whole private sector is mobilizing, and next week we will have another maybe hopefully 1.2 million doses coming in. Focus on NCR and maybe the Calabar area. This will really have an impact. Now, we need more vaccines. There's no doubt about it. And one thing good is that we're seeing that more and more people want to take the vaccines. But of course, there is still a number of people who don't like to take the vaccines because they don't believe in it. No. Now, how do we really create that defense? The idea of really slowing down Delta is to create a massive defense. And who is the defense? It is the people. As we take the vaccines and more people, let's say the target for herd immunity is 70%, maybe we have to take it up to 80% because now we're looking at Delta that's more highly infectious. And so you have to increase the number of people who will be vaccinated. Then you don't need a lockdown. The way forward is what strategy do we need to do to eventually move away from lockdowns and just focus on granular lockdowns. We could not do a granular lockdown here because this kind of Delta it's highly infectious. So the idea is to really lock down NCR. No? So hopefully 2 weeks will be enough. But again, the numbers will speak for itself, whether it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Sir, which particular business sectors will be most gravely affected by even this 2-week lockdown?
Well, all the restaurants, the tourism sector. Well, the tourism sector has been affected already ever since the pandemic. So they're the ones who are severely challenged. Thank God that most of the hotels are used as quarantine centers, so they're able to survive. No? But restaurants are affected, all the spas, all the parlors, and many other, especially those in the malls, are affected. Non-essential sectors are going to be affected. But then again, 2 weeks of sacrifice, well, the cases are still manageable. You can see what's happening in Cebu, Cagayan de Oro. You've seen what's happening in Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, even
but
Vietnam.
what's the guarantee? What's the guarantee that this will end in 2 weeks? I mean, how are we assured that this should be over in 2 weeks, or is there a chance that it might extend to another 2 weeks after that?
The lockdown just really buys us time. It slows down the virus. What is more important is we have to mobilize the entire vaccination teams to really inoculate. We have to get the supply of vaccines in the country and really inoculate the people. That is the solution. Lockdown is just to let the virus slow down, no? Push it back, and we go ahead and get the unvaccinated vaccinated. And you need vaccine supply. That's very clear. And you need a very concerted effort from both government and the private sector to do massive inoculation.
Speaking of which, sir, what's your assessment of the vaccine supply situation, particularly the participation by the private sector to bring in vaccines?
Well, there are challenges. AstraZeneca, this one that arrived in July, we were delayed 3 weeks. I got word that Moderna has some delay with the arrivals, but that is normal because everybody is scrambling for these vaccines, no? And I'm glad that the 3 million doses of what was donated to us by the Americans because of PV, I think arrived today. That's 3 million doses of Moderna. That's a big one, no? So, even the private sector, nobody is insulated from delays and challenges of delivery of vaccines. if Thailand goes into a serious situation, our vaccines that will be coming from Thailand will also be might meet the same delays. Novavax was ordered by the private sector and Covaxin out of India, and look what's happening now. It can't be delivered. India has banned exports till September. We don't know. It might even reach October.
Okay.
Okay, what about, I mean, you keep talking about vaccination being really the way forward, but even now we're hearing from other countries that the vaccines are slowly waning in effectivity. And that includes even Pfizer, which initially was said to be very effective against the Delta variant. No? Do you foresee us moving toward more boosters, even while we still don't have enough supply of, vaccines right now? I mean, kumbaga, we're catching up with what? We're too far behind to even catch up right now, or are we?
Yes, no. For example, in the case of the AstraZeneca vaccines, they're quite effective against Delta. But it doesn't mean that you are not going to get infected. You can get infected, but you are possibly be asymptomatic. Your illness will not be severe, and most probably you will not die. If you're unvaccinated, the chances of death is much higher. We have, and that's very clear. You can see cases here in the Philippines. I won't name the hospital. I asked the head doctor of this hospital. He has a lot of cases, but all of them are unvaccinated. So very clearly that the unvaccinated are the most vulnerable at this point in time. And all vaccines, even Sinovac, at that point in time, the government could not scramble for Pfizer and Moderna because they were all in high demand. So Sinovac has good protection against severe illness and death. Now, does it wane faster? Maybe possible, but eventually that's what we need to protect our people from severe illness and death. Now, down the road, I think the government will focus on good, stronger vaccines, but that all depends on the availability of supply. Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Novavax, and J&J would be the most ideal to have. But even if you want it, you might not be able to get it because many countries in the world are facing Delta. They are also wanting it as well. No?
Yeah,
So
but to that point, sir, go ahead, Ami.
What's the principal agenda tomorrow in your meeting? Is it about opposition to the ECQ or how to go about it, or what's the agenda?
No, the agenda basically is how do we win this war against Delta? What can the private sector do? What can the LGUs do? And what the national government can do? And hearing out DOH in their own projections and Octa and even John Wong, what is the parameter that will determine when we can get out of this lockdown? Is there a way? Are there numbers? What do we want to see? Can they present to us, okay, if we hit this level of positivity rate, can we be freed from this lockdown? So these are discussions, no? The mayors will explain their strategy, and how they will really try to hit 500, and they're doing 500, 600,000 a day, no, of jobs. That's good. So add the private sector to that, that will further increase. So we can do it. And I don't envy Secretary Galvez's job. It is really challenging. Just managing AstraZeneca arrival here, it's really tense. No, we're praying that the August is delivered and we will be able to sleep. No? So it's not that we're the only ones who can get this vaccine. Everybody wants this vaccine, especially the top 5. So it's something that we are trying to do our very best. No? And don't get me wrong. We push for the lockdown because we feel that the unvaccinated are at the highest risk at this point in time, and we don't want them to die, no, because they're unprotected, and we want them to have the vaccine, and that's why the lockdown slows down the virus and the efforts of the government, and they're really working very hard to get to that point. And the private sector, we don't even need to buy these vaccines. We bought the vaccines. We paid so much money last year, and they're arriving. So we are now helping government really solve this problem, because in the end, you can't open the economy freely and safely unless you solve the health problem. That's plain and simple.
Sir, do you have any estimates on, any numbers on the impact of the 2-week lockdown on the business sector in terms of possibly jobs lost or revenue and income lost?
Well, if you hear Secretary Carl and a lot of people, the numbers are so huge. Okay, that's fine. That's August. What about that happening in the last quarter? That's going to be 3 times more, right? So it's a choice. We don't want a lockdown. We don't never want a lockdown. But you got to protect where the quarter is the strongest. And that is the last quarter. And every businessman knows that the search for restaurants and everybody goes shopping and eating. And if you have it at that point in time, you break down the confidence of every entrepreneur, the hope of people crossing over. Emotionally, they will be affected. So do we want that to happen, that people move to 2022 with gloomy faces, lost hope, lost confidence? It's going to be challenging. So why lockdown on August? Our experts show it. I mean, DOH numbers show it. Octa numbers show it. So that must be something. And we see now Cebu. We see what's happening in Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Myanmar, and all these ASEAN countries. What will exempt the Philippines from Delta? Is there something, a magic thing that will exempt us from getting Delta? Let's be realistic. It is coming and it is here. Now, the sooner we accept it and do something about it, then we will save more lives and more livelihoods. That's my whole point. My role as an advisor to the president is to help our small entrepreneurs survive. And they've been challenged from last year, March, until now. And we want to also bolster the confidence of the banking community. Because if they don't see that there's a solution to this pandemic, and why are they going to lend? They're just going to not be able to collect their loans from whoever they lend to.
Okay. Mr. Joey Concepcion, Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship. Sir, maraming salamat po. Please stay safe.
Salamat,
you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And now joining us are Professors Guido David and Ranjit Rai of the Octa Research Group. Good evening, professors.
Good
Good
evening.
evening.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, Professor David. Sige, let's start with you. Here we are. We're at the doorstep of an ECQ. What are we projecting for best and worst case scenarios at the end of these 2-week lockdown?
Well, actually, we have we made a projection actually last week, and it showed that the earlier the lockdown, the lower the number of cases that we will reach. Because, I think that's clear. Last year, for example, in August, we locked down below 2,000 cases per day at around 1,800. And we didn't reach much higher than 2,500 cases per day. And that was a 2-week lockdown. So that's close to what we are hoping to see and close to what we are seeing in our projections. Of course, there will be some other factors such as the Delta variant, but there will be factors such as vaccination. So we will still have to see the numbers. So we think that it will sort of be capped at around 2,500 cases or less. Last March, when we had the lockdown, it was at 4,500 cases per day, so much higher compared to last year. And the ECQ and the MECQ lasted 7 weeks instead of 2 weeks. So that is what concerns the business owners, like Mr. Joey Concepcion, who just talked about, essentially advancing the lockdown. It will shorten the quarantine, the ECQ. It will save money in the long run, and it will save lives. So that is, the trade-off that we're looking at. So if we lock down too late, if we wait until we get to 5,000 cases, definitely your lockdown is going to last longer. Maybe it will last well into the Burr months, September, maybe even until October. And that would be more damaging to business owners and to the economy. So, that was a long answer, but
Well, this ECQ is different from the one at the start of the pandemic now. For one, you have mass transportation continuing, and there are a lot of businesses that will remain open, although under limited capacity. You think the restrictions are enough for this ECQ, considering that this is Delta, much more contagious?
Right. Well, maybe it's not the same as last year in March, but it's also more strict than what we had in March of this year. Because for one thing, I mean, intercity travel is not even allowed this time. I can't go from Quezon City to Pasig, for example. So I think the more stringent ECQ now will have a bigger effect on the number of cases compared to last March. Because last year in March, it was very strict, but we were still, we didn't have the testing, we didn't have the contact tracing. So there were a lot of ingredients missing. So we think that this time around, all these ingredients coming together, at least 20% fully vaccinated in the NCR will soften the blow somewhat of this, of this pandemic, of the Delta variant. These may play a factor, but we will have to see the numbers because it will be very difficult to project this. We don't even have an idea how much of the surge is driven by the Delta variant.
Professor Ranjit, Secretary Concepcion said something about, you explaining why the lockdown was needed to be done soon, no? And I just wonder if you can walk us through the discussions that basically changed the minds of the business community, no? Because it was like, the protocols changed overnight, right? It was just one day before that we had announced GCQ was going to stay and so on and so forth. What happened there? How did you convince them?
Oh, ba't kayo pinapakinggan ni Secretary Concepcion? Nakamute ka yata, Prof.
Unmute.
Prof,
First of all, I want to thank Secretary for listening to science. Secretary Concepcion, together with our mayors, their citizenship and leadership at that time really changed, brought consensus, to the IATF, and really, it's born not out of Octa. Octa is not important here. Octa merely made a suggestion, but it was the recognition of all the stakeholders that if we go early, go hard, we will not just save the fourth quarter, have a shorter lockdown, but will save lives. That's the most important thing. We did not want to have a repeat of the faux pas of March, where we were caught, where we lost effective control of the epidemic, and we not only lost the economy, we lost lives. And it's this passion to serve from the side of Secretary Concepcion and our mayors that drove them to the IATF to demand that we need to act now. And so this is, and the government listened. It's not listening to Octa. It's not important where it came from. What's important, it's not important who is right, but what is right. And what's right is saving lives and livelihoods. And that was the basic argument. And the difference now is that the business sector, Octa, and the local government leaders are all together. We see the problem, and so does government. And now with this strong consensus, with this call to work together, we're really hopeful that with the 2-week lockdown, we will be able to mitigate the worst impact of this evolving surge in COVID cases in the National Capital Region. So how we did it? We consulted, deliberation, consultation, the respect for science, the inclusiveness of the group of Secretary Concepcion and the mayors in the NCR. I think that was what that was important. And when we made the suggestion, we made it in front of Secretary Duque also and his chief consultant, and in front of the business community. We raised an argument that the lockdown is not a question of if, it's a question of when. Are we going to lock down later when we have 5,000 cases, or are we going to lock down now when we can save the economy and save more lives? It's simple.
Yes, sir, but I do remember there was quite a bit of resistance from several health officials to the proposals coming from Octa. I'm wondering lang what the clincher was kasi you're both proceeding from the same data, di ba? So science-wise pareho po kayong pinaghuhugutan, pero medyo magkaiba ng interpretasyon. I'm wondering lang kung ano yung clincher doon sa, sa deciding factor eh.
The basic disagreement of some of our colleagues who we deeply respect from the DOH, despite the fact that they rant on social media and completely behaving against established norms and practices of academics from the university we belong to. That being said, okay, their basic argument is that we're alarmist. But the clincher here, as far as the ISTF is concerned, was not even our own models. It was the model of the DOH that basically validated our argument. And that was the clincher. The alarm created by that model, which will be discussed tomorrow, is what validates the basic argument of Octa. And it's not, again, it's not about Octa, it's about us trying to face, and if I may be hyperbolic because there are a lot of writers here, the existential threat possibly brought by Delta. And this is not about us. This is not about who's better, who is epistemologically trespassing. It's about saving lives. There is a real serious surge, and it's going to cost us lives and livelihoods. And the government made a good judgment, okay, by starting early and facing this together with all of us together. This is the first time that the business is with Octa and the local governments are together. So I think this is good judgment call from government. Let's all help each other prevent this surge from further devastating lives and livelihoods.
Hi, Professor David, on the other side of the projections, we've been talking about projections about the cases. But what about projections in terms of vaccination and vaccination rates? Kanina, Secretary Concepcion did allude to that as well, no? That we're going to slow down. We might as well make the most of this slowdown and get as many people vaccinated habang mag-lockdown yung economy. What are we projecting and what would represent a missed opportunity in terms of numbers? What should we at least reasonably target by habang naka-lockdown? How much higher do we expect the vaccination of our population to go?
Well, Robbie, I think some of those who work with the vaccination program will have a better grasp of the numbers. But based on what I'm hearing, at least, for example, from Father Nicanor, they've reallocated about 4 million vaccines in the NCR, and I think the target is to get all those vaccines, done within the 2-week period. So that would be 2 million vaccinated people, or at least maybe some for the first dose. My understanding is that we have at least 20%, more or less, of the population of NCR fully vaccinated. 20% would be around maybe 2.8 million. So if we could add another, 2 million vaccinated people, 4.8, we're getting closer to our target, which is around, it would be around 7 million for population protection. The projection would be, of course, it won't be done by August 20, but we think that perhaps by September or October, we'll get the 40 to 50% fully vaccinated in the NCR. And that will definitely help us long term, because what we have seen in the US, in the UK, and Israel, they definitely opened up their economy, their businesses. They're on a boom right now. Consumer spending is very high in the US because of people, after more than 1 year of dealing with the pandemic. I think we're gonna see that here. So I'm actually quite optimistic about at least the fourth quarter that we're talking about.
Okay, Professor Guido David and Professor Ranjit Rai of Octa Research. Sirs, maraming salamat po.
Maraming
Thank you,
salamat.
sir.
Ingat po.
Thank you.
Before we end, here's a message to our athletes from MVP Sports Foundation Chairman Manny V. Pangilinan.
Before our four boxers started, we had a Zoom meeting with all four and just chatted with them to calm them down, and assure them of our support. I think important din yun that they know that the whole country is behind them. Basta to assure them that nandun kami, whether in victory or not in victory, nandun kami.
dami natin pinag-usapan about COVID, of course, ay napakalaga. But we don't want to end this without talking about what a high we've all been having these past few days and in the coming days.
Yes, agree.
Meron tayong mga good news, ano? At least,
Oo. Kahit breath of good news lang, okay na yon. We'll take it. Kesa naman breath of COVID.
diba? Maganda din yun sa health.
Oo.
Yes.
Diba? Good for morale.
Oo. Kanina napanood nyo ba yung interview kay Nesty? Kay Nesty
Oo,
Pete? Nakakapuwing eh. Napuwing ako habang nanonood.
Na-feel ko yung na-feel niyang frustration. No? Kasi it was a close fight, wasn't it?
Well, may mga inaasahan pa rin naman tayo within the week. So, ayan. Something to look forward to in this...
Paalam.
And of course, we're all very proud of Nesty, lahat ng lumaban, EJ Obiena, lahat ng lumaban para sa Team Philippines, para po sa ating bayan. We're all very proud. And in the coming days, starting tomorrow, the golfers will be teeing off. Yuka Saso.
Yes.
And then the boxers fighting for gold in the coming days.
Yumir.
Patuloy po ang ating pagdasal and cheering on our team in Tokyo. For now, that's all for this special edition of The Chiefs, but we hope it was discussed here. We'll keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao, and we are One News.